So now that I've told you my story, I would like to tell you a little bit more about someone else's story, about Michelle Easton, who is the founder and has been the president of the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women for the past 30 years. Michelle is a very impressive woman. Prior to founding the center, she received presidential appointments from both the Reagan and George H.W. Bush administrations with Senate confirmation for her position to the U.S. Department of Education. She served for all 12 years of the administration, both their administrations. She was also appointed by Virginia Governor George Allen to the State Board of Education, where she was later elected to president of the board. Before her government service, Michelle worked in the conservative movement. She worked 5 years at YAF, and then she worked 2 years for National Right to Work, and she put herself through law school in night classes, and she eventually graduated from the American University's Washington School of Law in 1980. And she received her BA in development psychology from Briarcliff College in New York, where she briefly held a teaching position before moving to Washington, D.C. in 1973. Michelle, who is the author of How to Raise a Conservative Daughter, a book that outlines principles learned over the years of decades working with young conservative women, will be speaking about her book today. So please welcome me, or join me in welcoming Michelle Easton.
Thank you so much, Evangeline. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I want to promise, first off, I'm not going to speak for an hour shouting at you angrily. Wasn't that embarrassing for our country? Holy moly. Well, it is a privilege to be here with the dedicated ladies of the Women's Republican Club of Naples. And I start by thanking you all for the work you do on behalf of our shared principles. I want to give a special thanks to Darlene Stevenson, who was the one who introduced me to your club, and thanks to your president, Kathy Luce, and Julie Kupperman, who made most of the arrangements with me. I appreciate being here today. And I want to introduce one colleague, Cindy Rushing. Where's Cindy? She's out taking pictures. Oh, there she is. Cindy is our development director. We travel the country together to meet with our wonderful supporters. She raised 4 conservative children. She's a good friend and a traveling companion. She's the best. So many other people here, but I know Kathy wants me to go along quickly, so I can't introduce them all. But my sister Carol, my brother-in-law, my friends Judy, the 2 ladies who came all the way from Quincy, Illinois, and my husband was introduced, but I'm going to introduce him again. 50 years in September, we will have been married, and he has a different last name, it's true, and 50 years ago, that was unusual, but when we had been married for about 20 years, I kept my family name. My mother grudgingly said to me, well, I guess the name thing's gonna work. And I'm so happy to have him here. He was the predecessor to Governor Walker, who spoke for you all a couple of months ago. And he's actually the one that saved Ronald Reagan's ranch. It had a contract on it to be purchased by a rotten Democrat. He was going to tear down that beautiful little ranch house and build some gaudy, big, modern house up on a hill. But Ron worked with Mrs. Reagan, and they managed to save that. And thank you so much for doing that, Ron. And since this is a Republican group, I just have to talk a little about Clare Boothe Luce, whose name is on the Center for Conservative Women. She was a conservative Republican congresswoman and an activist. She was the author of a play called The Woman. The Women, you've all seen it. It was a movie way back, and then it was a movie again in 2008. And it's the wonderful thing about this movie is it's not one man in this play or this movie, but it's all about men. It's great. Now, How to Raise a Conservative Daughter. This is my book. You see it's all tabbed there. I've done maybe 50 talk radio, and it's really helpful to have the tabs to turn to the page that you want on it. People say to me, why did you write a book like this? I mean, if your family's conservative and you take your girls to church or synagogue, won't she turn out to be conservative? used to be that way back when some of us were growing up, but today the challenges are enormous. Toxic social media, radical indoctrination in the schools, the entertainment industry goes so low, the chances that your daughter or your granddaughter or your niece will become a conservative are not as good anymore. So my goal for the readers of this, and I know a number of you have bought it out front, and I hope you enjoy it, is to start thinking about your conservative values and how to instill them through practical real-life applications to strengthen and support your daughter's hearts and minds. And if you do that, if they do that, parents do that, they will have given their daughters a priceless and enduring gift. And few things in life are more important. Now, I've spent 30 years at the Center for Conservative Women. I founded it with outstanding college women that we work with. And over the years, people have said to me, how do these girls turn out so wonderfully? Smart, attractive, courageous. And I noticed things that had gone on in their lives as they were growing up. And I was asked many times by supporters, how did these young women turn out so well? So I wrote this book. I started taking notes, and I wrote this book to share what I learned over the years as a guide to parents, to grandparents, anyone in a position to influence raising daughters who are confident, informed, and passionate. One friend told me from here on out, this book is given as her gift to all new baby girls and baptisms. Now, what I do in the book is I lay out in 11 chapters key items to raise a girl to be a smart and solid conservative. Here's the key. Here's the number one key. To help daughters understand they are loved by God. From there, I describe how to move daughters forward through understanding the value of life, of work, of money, of deferred gratification. One person asked me, is faith really that important? Yes, it is. Let me explain. The reason I started with chapter 1 titled Self-Worth Flows from God, Not Government, is because religious faith and freedom are inextricably linked. Why do the totalitarian governments in communist China, in Cuba, in North Korea try to impose atheism on their people? Because people of faith know that their self-worth comes from God and not from government, and this threatens these dictators' control and power. In these brutal, godless socialist tyrannies, they torture, imprison, execute people of faith to crush freedom movements and enforce atheism. American socialists like President Biden last night, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they encourage Americans to be dependent on government. Government is the higher power they want people to look to. Often it's a stand-in for a religion. And left-wing leaders, Bernie Sanders, AOC, they always want to give so-called free stuff, free college, free housing, free food. They want people to look to government as the higher power. So this is a really key thing for your daughters and your granddaughters to understand, the connection between faith and freedom. And knowing she is uniquely made and unconditionally loved by God will be the cornerstone of her conservatism. So much of what is conveyed to young women in school, in the popular culture, and the media suggests that government benefits, affirmative actions, healthcare, housing, and other stuff are what give girls self-worth. But our children hear a lot about self-esteem, especially in K-12 schools. Self-esteem is okay. I mean, it's a feeling of satisfaction that you have, and it mostly comes from other people. My baby sister, I'm going to tell you one story here. She was a teacher in Cape Cod for many years, and the teachers there were told to tell every child every day how awesome they were. But Carol told me they weren't awesome. And on the occasions when they were, the praise had been so overdone it was meaningless. But surveys show that American children have very high self-esteem. Self-worth is a totally different concept. It's the greatest gift you can give your daughters, the knowledge that she's uniquely made and unconditionally loved by God. I'm going to skip ahead here because Kathy said we're mostly out of time. I'm going to mention a couple of things here. Social media. Many parents don't understand how powerful social media is. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. They're immensely influential and contain so much harmful material for your kids. Pornography is widespread. Fake lives are created that show flawless beauty and extravagant materialism. An idealized version of life that's not reality, as well as promoting liberal positions on most every issue. And TikTok, the communist Chinese government uses it to influence our children, to criticize our country, and they collect data about them. It may not be practical for most parents to eliminate social media, except don't allow TikTok, please. But curtailing screen time is a good place to start. And I talk about in the book how when my 3 sons were growing up, TV was the time waster. And the rule in the house, there was no social media then, it was before that. No TV on school nights, and that worked pretty well. 5 nights a week, instead of watching TV, they did schoolwork, they played games, they did sports, they practiced their music, and they were so much better for it. So that's one of the suggestions I have in how to raise a conservative daughter. Restrict the social media instead of having your child get addicted to that online empty life. There's so many more great pursuits for her. One more I want to mention, and then I'll come to the end. Do you know the most consistent trait I've found in these outstanding young women that I've worked with over the years? They've had jobs and learning that hard work is a virtue. That's chapter 4. They're old enough. Once they're old enough to go to work, they should have jobs and responsibility that teach them the value of hard work. Most people remember their first job with a smile. Think about it. What was your first job? Mine was, I was 16 in New York State. We were allowed to work at 16. And I worked in a movie theater, ran the popcorn stand, and sold tickets. Only not on school nights. I was only allowed to do it on weekend nights. And my parents only let me do it because my brother was an usher there. So he could keep an eye on you. You have to protect your girls. But I remember getting my first paycheck. Minimum wage was $1.25 an hour. That shows you how old I am. And being astounded at the big chunk they took out of my tiny little paycheck for taxes. And suddenly, my father's dinner table discussion of taxes being too high and preventing our family from doing what we wanted was no longer an academic discussion. Think about it. Your first job and what you learned. One of our sons learned that, this is Thomas, Carol, he learned that he didn't want to stack shelves at Target for the rest of his life. He got serious about school. He went to Hillsdale and got the best education of all my kids. Just one more thing I'll mention, Kathy, then I'm going to wrap up. Another key of raising conservative daughters is for her to learn that a woman's differences are her strengths. Chapter 5. The left's propaganda that men and women are exactly the same is just a lie. Show them that there are not differences between men and women's intellect, but then teach her to celebrate the natural variations between men and women. The breathtaking miracle of childbearing elevates females. Maybe your daughter's not a girly girl. Some girls would like to be tomboys and climb trees and make mud pies, and that's fine. Allow her to be who God made her to be. Girls may move through phases. She may be tomorrow's beauty queen. You don't know what's around the corner, and that's part of the fun. And the point is to protect girls, trust their natural development, and allow your daughter's femininity to blossom in God's perfect timing. This used to be well understood, the difference between boys and girls, but we know from the Riley Gaines experiences that so many of our girls have had that it really is a battle now. And so we have one book. It's out on our table, and I'm going to hold it up for you to see. It's called Sense and Sexuality, and this is a play on, for you Jane Austen fans, Sense and Sensibility. You remember the Dashwood sisters and their love and their romance. Before your girl starts to date, keep her safe by teaching how physical intimacy affects women differently than men with this little book. It's called The College Girl's Guide to Real Protection in a Hooked Up World. It's been our most requested booklet for years now, and one of the biggest requesters are these clinics where girls who get pregnant go to have their babies and then they're adopted. They don't abort their babies because they want to make sure the girls understand this so they don't have a second baby out of wedlock. It's scientific, it's medical, it's not moralistic, much as I like to pound the table and be moralistic. This one really talks about the difference between men and women, and what they learn in college. Here's what they tell the kids at college about health and intimacy. Get tested and use protection. That's all they tell them. It's so inadequate and damaging to young women. The doctor who wrote this was a UCLA counselor for many years. She tells how young women came in often December or January of the freshman year. Pretty women, smart women, academically successful, good families, with diseases, with severe depression, with emotional problems, really messed up after hooking up. And they'd say to her, if only someone had told me about this difference. And so we tell them in this. It tells young women about the medical biochemistry of attachment that girls have that boys do not have. I hope you'll read the book. I hope you'll pass it on to mothers and fathers, if you're not one, who learn to do more things to raise a conservative daughter. So to summarize, don't assume your daughter or granddaughter will become conservative because the family is. Talk with her about the most important issues. And if you have to read up on them, please do. Make sure that she understands that in America, our rights come from God, not from government, and that her source of self-worth is God, that she's uniquely made and unconditionally loved by God. And this will be a cornerstone of her conservatism. Help her understand that a woman's differences from a man are her strengths. And if she's blessed with a good marriage and a child, she's done something wonderful. Teach her about money, how to manage it. Make sure she's learned to read well. Encourage her to join a church group, to be involved in music, arts, sports, and to read a lot. Take her to church. And if you don't go to church, go. Or send her with your mother or your neighbor or your sister or somebody who does. And when she gets to college, encourage her to be an activist for her beliefs, like Evangeline. Promoting great conservatives. We have a calendar. There's a bunch out on the table. Great American conservative women. They've all spoken for us. First one in here is Riley Gaines. She's something else. Molly Hemingway, Senator Blackburn, Kayleigh McEnany. These are all women that love to go out and speak to colleges and have a conservative point of view heard, a rare thing on most campuses. Raising a conservative daughter is hard, and raising any kind of a daughter, any kind of a child is hard. It's true in this day and age. But parents cannot just sit back and watch anymore, kind of like my parents did. But the goal is not to force the girl to think in a certain way. It's to guide her to become the best person she can be while instilling conservative values. Think about your conservative values and how to instill them. And I give you a lot of suggestions in the book about practical real-life applications and how to raise a conservative daughter. Thank you so much.